Good to be back with you again this week. And we missed you last week, Bishop.
I missed you guys as well.
Taking a little break, getting away from us, getting away from the heat. But I'm glad you are back in the studio. Coach is on his way, handling some business with the boxing team at the university. But before we jump in, Bishop, do you mind just opening us up with a word of prayer?
Absolutely. God, we're grateful for being able to come together once again on tonight. Thank you for life itself, the doors that you continue to open as we continue to aspire to save the lives of our Black men, and also, God, to celebrate and create wins for development and growth, and just turning around those dark places, God, that the disparities that we face every day. We pray that our time tonight, God, you would be glorified and the people would be blessed. In Jesus' name we pray. Thank God and amen.
Amen. Hey, and as always, we like to kind of kick things off with the why we talk about this, why we show up every year doing this show. It's all about the why. America has a hunger crisis impacting 44 million people, and Arkansas leads the nation. But here's the real concern. School's out right now. And that means the meals are out for these kids. Summer doesn't just bring heat, it brings hunger. And I know, Bishop, now, are y'all doing it tomorrow? Y'all do it most Wednesdays?
Every Wednesday.
Yeah. Every Wednesday. Bishop's church is out there feeding the community, making sure those mamas and those kids and those grandmamas and everyone else, they've got a little bit of food on their plate to get them through the week. I think the statistic I saw is the average American, even on food stamps, is about $25 a person short on getting the calories out there. We've seen changes in the food stamps program this year, which means we've had a lot of people fall off the rolls. And I know there's fraud. I know there's a lot of other things on there, but we've got a lot of these young kids that when the food is short, they start doing stupid.
Absolutely.
And so it's huge for all of us to get involved in that. It's about the widow. The United States has the highest rate of single-parent households in the world, nearly 24 million children growing up in homes led by only one parent. And the truth is that Arkansas has the highest divorce rate in the nation. And that means millions of families are navigating life without the full support system they were designed to have. Scripture calls us to care for the orphan, and right now over 391,000 children are in the foster care system, including nearly 4,000 of them right here in Arkansas. And if we don't step in, we're not rescuing children, we're recycling the trauma, because when you look at our prisons, they're overrun with kids that have come through the foster care system. They're overrun by kids who have missed out on a loving family to care for them and to take care of them. We got to step in that gap more than ever. Poverty currently grips 38 million Americans, and kids of color bear the brunt. In Arkansas, 17,000 kids are currently homeless, according to the schools in McKinney-Vento. And people who grow up in poverty actually experience alterations to a child's brain development and stress responses. We're also dealing with the addiction problem. 90% of adults struggling with substance addiction first started using that substance before the age of 18. We've got so many of the men that we run across on a daily basis, man, they are trapped by this substance abuse. We got to step in for them. It's the prisoner. America holds over 2 million people in prison. That's the highest in the world. And crime costs our nation nearly $500 billion a year. We got to step in. We've got to block these young people from taking the wrong paths in their life. That means mentors. That means churches. That means schools have got to step up and into the game. And at every Arkansan, our vision is clear. More people chasing their God-given dreams, but too often those dreams are limited not by talent, not by ambition, but by the zip code someone is born into. And that's why we're proud to host First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill, a show dedicated to confronting the realities facing our young men. And here's a reality we cannot ignore. The number one cause of death for Black males 0 to 44 is homicide. It's not cancer, not heart disease, not car accidents, it's homicide. And if we want to see these dreams pursued, we must first confront the forces that cut these lives short. And I mean, just this week this last week, we saw homicide in Pine Bluff. We saw a homicide at the hotel right down the street from where the studio is. And when you look at the people that are being arrested, man, it breaks your heart to see 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. It breaks your heart to see anyone. But when you see these young people whose They've taken a life, and I get it, but they've also stopped their life from moving forward. We've got to get in there. We've got to look at this problem more and more, and that's why we're here each and every week. And this week, I want to kind of talk about a post Coach put out there on social media, and one of the facts was on the literacy rates. And we're going to jump into this. I've kind of titled this "Freedom to Read: Closing America's Leaders." Reading is not just another school subject. Reading is the doorway to every other subject. And because when a child cannot read, that child is not merely behind in English class. That child is at risk of being locked out of an opportunity. And so, Coach, I did the research. I found where your stat came from. In a 2019 NAEP reading assessment, approximately 6% of Black male 12th graders scored at or above proficient level, which means 94% did not reach proficiency in reading.
Can you imagine that?
I mean, and the scary thing is the most recent report from the same institute says from 2022 to 2024, we've continued to see a slide. Mm-hmm. And this slide started before pandemic was even there. So we can say all we want to about what the pandemic did to us. This has been a trend,
right,
for beyond that. And now we got to be careful with the word proficient, because proficient is different on different levels. This is a national proficiency. So some schools do a local, some do this, but this is on the national. But no matter how we define it, the direction is alarming.
It is.
Too many children can't confidently understand what they read, explain it, apply it, or use it to learn something even new. And for generations, Black students have faced lower reading scores than white students. And the causes are not biological. There's no evidence that says a Black child lacks the intelligence or potential. They reflect generations of unequal access to quality schools, inexperienced teachers, safe neighborhoods, books, early childhood education, economic stability, and I think most importantly, the generational curse that illiteracy lays the foundation for, that it just makes it worse and worse.
But, as I've mentioned on several occasions, and the studies have shown that, and I was speaking yesterday to the Deputy Wards Association, and then I spoke to the co-op of Arkansas in Hot Springs, two speaking engagements yesterday, and I was sharing with them is that when I think back about the history and think about how HBCUs were started, so when I think back about right now, 1884, all right, so what had to happen from 1865 for the next 19 years to 1884 that people came together in a community, not the city, not the state, not the federal government said, we're going to go teach reading to these sons and daughters of former slaves. But that was the moral compass, a thermostat of our community, Bishop, at the time, because that's what the church did. And if you realize that's how these colleges and these schools were started, they were birthed outside of the churches. So when you look at the historic Baptist church up there, right off Center State, was the starting place of Arkansas Baptist College before Old Main. So you had a fortitude with an attitude of we're going to learn and we're going to teach. And what I'm saying right now, when I saw these statistics now, I knew they were alarming, but I didn't know that they were this deafening. And I'm a reader.
I mean, Coach, when you look at this, in 1870, 5 years after the Civil War ended, 80% of Black Americans aged 14 and older were classified as unable to read or write. And that's not just because of formerly enslaved people did not value education. It's because for generations, many states had actually outlawed it.
You couldn't read it. Exactly right.
But when you look at what happened once even limited educational opportunities become available, things are just crazy. Black school enrollment rose from 10% in 1870 to 34% by 1880. Black literacy fell from 80% in 1870 to 44.5% in 1900, 30% in 1910, 16% by 1930. The literacy rate was better in 1930 than it is today.
And that's incredible, because that's the community. That's the word unity and community, and the moral thermostat that was taking place, and I was mentioning this in my post, think about Vacation Bible School. Think about Sunday school. Think about all those things. And I'm saying, when we look at our DYS students, when we look at our incarcerated citizens, it's tying back to this literacy piece in poverty and not being educated. And the things that were valued the most in the time that you're talking about are no longer core fundamentals of how we're teaching. Why is there not? There's an article I was reading. Why is there not a radical movement on this issue? And I'm telling you, this is something that in my heart I knew was a problem, but I'm thinking the dropout. I didn't know that when young men were getting to high school and graduating, that they still were not proficient.
No, it's crazy. And I mean, think about this. People who had been legally forbidden from reading reduced literacy by almost half in only 30 years. They built their own schools while living under segregation.
Mm-hmm. Jim Crow, everything.
They purchased their own books, working for poverty wages.
Or got hand-me-down books.
They created colleges, ABC, while being denied admission to most of the existing schools. They learned to read because they understood that literacy was part of freedom. And I mean, think about it. The first generation out of slavery treated education like liberation. But we can't allow that generation currently to treat it more like an inconvenience.
Right.
And it breaks your heart.
Because the word is, education is liberation. Mm-hmm. If you look at the context of how it's going. But when I sit here and I just started thinking about, when I looked at the data set and I started thinking about, that's why Dr. Prince's Meta program is so empowering, because of the interactive education experiences that you have while you're learning, rather than the way that education is taught today to this specific population. I'm just going to say, how can you say that 94% are not at reading level at graduation and think it's working?
We got access, but we don't have desire.
Yeah, and teaching.
Integration opened the doors, but opening the door is not the same as preparing every child to walk through it. So, hey guys, it is the end of the first quarter with First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back.
Other days they don't. Oh, hell, okay. Guess what you woke up today? Put a big smile on your face. One thing ain't never gonna change. God is good.
Hey guys, Drew here, and for the last 11 years, we've worked together to build the Arkansas Dream Center. And over those years, things have grown, opportunities have happened, but we've continued to focus on that mission of every Arkansan chasing their God-given dream. And for that very reason, our corporation is actually known as Every Arkansan Inc. We have two ministries that really work together in tandem to see that mission take place. We have the Arkansas Dream Center, which is going out and we're reaching out to the communities. We're in those communities with mobile trucks. We're doing after school, we're feeding, we're doing all those things you know us for doing. But in addition, we realize that the church is the answer to a lot of society's problems, and there's one on every corner. So we have City Serve that comes along the side of the church, and they provide the resources. They provide furniture and clothing and diapers and all these things to the local churches so they can reach out to their neighbors. And together, when those two start to mesh, we're going out and we're bringing the churches alongside of them, and we're equipping and we're resourcing those churches. We can truly empower the local church with the resources they need to strengthen relationships in their communities. And that's what our vision is for Every Arkansan Inc. And we're so glad you're a part of it.
In the sun, God is good all the time. Okay, some days be the best, some days be the worst, some days stay on replay.
And we are back with First and 45, and we're talking about reading. And man, when you look at this, the consequences eventually of this reading reached our colleges. According to the National Center for Educational Statistics, among first-year college students in 2019-2020, 31% reported that they had taken remedial classes at some point. Among Black first-year students, that number is 38% took remedial coursework. So when you really kind of look at that, Coach, only 22 to 23% of Black males in the U.S. have college degrees. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about a fraction, and then we're talking about even of that. So that's telling you right there, to back up the statistic and do the math, 77 to 78% of Black males did not attend college. So we don't really have the true data on what the literacy rates were.
Correct.
And so it could be much worse than what we think it is.
Well, think about this, to your point. Okay, and I'm going to really dive hard into this over the next, because this is a core social determinant that I realize. We talked about elementary school suspension, we talk about poverty, but when you start looking at a young man, particularly the population that we are focusing on, and looking at where we can get the greatest return, the education system is so fractured for this population, and we are sitting here observing that 94% of this population, okay, which we know that the 2% is birthed out of this number. Mm-hmm. But what's even more so, as you think about it, this 94%, thank God they stayed in school.
Right.
All right. And but how are we getting them up to speed to realize the challenges that are before them? And then this is probably impacting those who attempt to go to college and end up dropping out because of the challenge. If they're not
absolutely
at a school that's going to work with them and say that you need remediation, then I mean, it's a problem. So this has a huge impact on society, and it's causing our nation millions and millions and millions of dollars.
I think it's billions, if not a trillion.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the problem, it didn't just appear on move-in day for these college students. I mean, you talk again years earlier, a child struggles with phonics in the first grade. Child learned to hide that struggle by the third grade. Sixth grade, the child avoided reading out loud altogether. Ninth grade, the student could decode some words, but struggled to comprehend complicated passages and thoughts. And then we handed that student a diploma and called the student college ready. I mean, a diploma should be evidence of preparation, not a ceremonial permission slip to struggle at the next level. And that's what it seems like we've created here. Okay, you've got your high school diploma, but you can't read.
Right. That's exactly right.
I mean, what was it? The 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. I mean, you can't do one of the three. And I can guarantee you, if you can't do one of the three, if you can't read, you can't write. And I can guarantee you, just from my experience, if you look at math proficiency levels, it's as bad as the reading. And it breaks your heart, because we got to do something. And I think we've had educators and systems say, oh, well, we've got to implement this new curriculum and that curriculum. But I mean, I think it's a lot simpler than that. I mean, first, we just got to read with kids.
Yeah. And then when you think back about how this has changed, and when you remember, I've mentioned this before, Hidden Figures. Okay. When you take Hidden Figures, the movie, when these teachers taught these people how to compute, how to add, how to send man to the moon, mm-hmm. They weren't certified teachers.
No.
They didn't go through this curriculum to say.
And we're talking pretty well pre-integration.
This was
pre-civil rights.
That's exactly right. So now when you come in and look at the standards that have been given to try to make sure that this population can read, why the decrease? Now, there are social determinants with the factors we have to look at, that the more, the moral climate that we're talking about, from the illegitimacy rates that we're talking about, mm-hmm. teenage pregnancy and all that. But guys, I don't know how we can sit here each day and look at this crisis, and these things are bursting as I'm looking at this black male homicide epidemic. So the kids that are going to prison, they can't read. The kids that are being murdered, they can't read. And so we're sitting here trying to fix a system okay, without a solution, and we build more prisons. And I understand that, because then you go to prison, and what you have to do, you have to get your GED.
Yep.
You have to learn to. So the system is really messed up. And I'm saying these conversations are necessary. And like today, I went on my post. One person's when I sit there and said 94%, the post mentioned of African American males are not proficient upon graduation. Then I guess she was a teacher. She said, I taught school, and white kids, I know white kids can't read either. I understand that, and I respect that, and I hope that somebody is working on that specific issue. But what I can tell you is that there is not a white male epidemic because of this crisis that we're talking about. And that's the thing that I'm looking at. If you're listening, I'm talking about life and death and how this is impacting our society. I shared yesterday, and I'm gonna give you some time back in my half. So I shared yesterday with the group. I'm convinced that our population has declined because of this crisis. That when I look at the Hispanic population, and that Hispanic population in the 1990s was at 8%. The African American population was at 11%. Fast forward to now, the Hispanic population is near 20%. We're only at 13%. And I said, you cannot reproduce in jail cells and in the graves. And so how do you end up? You end up in that situation when you are not able to read, write. Okay, you come from poverty. All right, you're a baby's raising a baby. And these are social factors that must be addressed within our communities. We can't look at the situation. I think last year I was heard DYS, there were 3 teenage pregnant girls in the Little Rock School District. Okay, so I'm saying right now, I said, well, we want to help those babies. I said, we take those 3 teenage babies and give them a life plan to say, listen, you cannot have any more children. Okay, you have to graduate high school, so your child will graduate high school. But we know that this is not a factor, because this is not what's happening, because when I look at the anecdotal information I have from the young people we're working with, how many sisters you got? 6. I mean, how many siblings you got? 6. Okay. How old is your mom? 31. How old are you? 14, 15. And I mean, it is a crisis beyond epic proportion, and we are not addressing this to fix it.
No, I mean, you think about it. It's like the solution is to read with a kid. Sounds real simple, but then that means you can't just assign a book to them, say, go read this, especially at the younger ages. You got to sit there and read with them. But if mama can't read, dad's abandoned the family, so he's not reading with them. And then more than likely, if mama can't read, then you're going to look at grandma who can't read. All of a sudden, it's like, where is this kid going to find hope? They're not going to find it in their home. And that should be an alarm bell for all of us that, hey, what can we do? Because, Coach, I mean, it's like you said. I mean, we were reading in church. I mean, it wasn't, I don't want to read out loud. No. Whoever that Sunday school teacher was,
that's right.
Said, you're going to read.
You're going to read.
And then you look at it, it's like when we go back to 1870 and there were no formalized schools, but people were learning to read, and we had the fastest growth in literacy rates among a population who had been decimated. How did that happen? It didn't happen in schools.
That's the game
It
plan.
happened with people reading with others. And I mean, when we start talking about that, it's like, you've got to listen to someone reading fluently. You've got to be able to pronounce words. You've got to be able to explain words. I remember when I started college, in the back of my notebook, every class at Hendrix, I'd write down the word I didn't understand. And then I went back to the dorm and I looked it up in a dictionary.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of grew in college. There was language in college I didn't understand, but I knew how to go to a dictionary. I knew how to at least spell out a word that I didn't know what it meant. I knew how to come up with a solution because I was a reader. I knew how to do that. I mean, we look at these kids and we're like, man, they're giving up on everything because they failed at something. And I can't remember if we were talking about this last week or not, but it's like you go to a foreign country and you look around at all these signs and you can't read a single thing.
Illiterate.
That's the kids in America today. And yes, it could be white kids and it could be black kids and it could be whatever. Well, let's just get down to brass tacks. This should not be a situation for any child to have to struggle. Reading aloud should not stop when a child becomes old enough to read independently.
You remember when Mr. Jackson, when he came in here the other day, he explained that to me. How did that impact you? He said how he faked reading all his life.
It just blew my mind. But he said he studied the people that was actually taking the tests and he was listening. He became astute to listening, and then he learned the trade of cooking.
But he got fired because he
got fired when he went. When he was supervisor. Because he supervisor, right. He got fired.
Because he wanted him to do something he couldn't.
He wanted him to write someone up. One of his employees.
He wanted to write him up, and he couldn't do it. All right, and so he ended up getting fired because he had hid it so long, and he said that was the reason. He said, I'm not going to do it. But rather than him he told that story, rather than him telling his employer that he was illiterate, and that's why he didn't write him up, it got him terminated.
See, it's crazy, Coach, because, the importance of this is you talk about this when you say, how in the world did the 10 Commandments get given to us? They were written down.
That's right.
And Deuteronomy 6 tells parents, teach God's commandments diligently to your children when sitting at home, when walking along the road, when lying down and getting up. What is that telling you? Well, you need to teach your kids to read those commandments because that's how they were given to you. Mm-hmm. Teaching was supposed to become part of the rhythm of family life. And when families break down and we rely upon the government or schools to be the solution, all of a sudden, we've got a lot of kids left behind.
No question.
And it just breaks your heart. But we got to recognize a painful reality. Some parents, they can't read. Evidently, some schools, the teachers can't read or something because it doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Here's the deal that I learned, doing the education, is that the teachers can read, but every teacher can't teach reading.
That's true.
That's the issue. And see, and
I can't teach anything.
Yeah, right. So reading that's a special skill, and I see this in our adult education program. Okay. So there are certain people coming there like they get the GED that they work on their literacy. Every teacher can't do that, and so that's why this says from the first 1,000 days, from conception, to third grade, you learn to read, and for the rest of your life, you read to learn. And those teachers outside of the middle school, elementary school, they're not there to teach reading. They're there to teach the subject. That's an issue.
Absolutely. And when we get back, I want to talk about how Meta has cures for that. But anyway, hey, it's the end of the first half of First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill. We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to be right back.
Yeah, I got a light and sauce for strong. Don't want to lose this, no. Your love, it pours on and on. You tell me I'm not alone.
As a former football coach, knowing the engagement that takes place on the football field, the basketball courts, the track, baseball, outside of extracurricular activity, Meta is the best academic curriculum I've seen for the oftentimes socially challenged student. And glad to have a pilot program going here now with Hamilton Learning Academy, as well as a juvenile detention facility to inspire, grow hope to a population of kids who sometimes don't believe that in the United States that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is for them. And so this opportunity allows them to see that, to feel that, and to engage in that, and to leave here thinking that I can do something that maybe they didn't think they could do prior to enrolling in the Better 24 program.
All right, who's the CFO? Yeah. Come on up. Give CFO a round of applause. All right, what's the marketing promotion team? Me. One.
My name is Shania, and I make this pillow. It's a baby pillow for baby. It can be for a boy or for a girl. It's saying, be what you want to be. I really want to make a side hustle of this and give pillows to the hospital so you don't get good rest with soft pillows like this.
Richard, I want to 3D print some stuff that's that will help us in the world. I would love to print 3 houses to help architects build real houses, because there's a lot of people in the world that homeless right now. And I feel like if I'm able to print 3 houses, I feel like architects can make more houses faster.
Hey, yeah, Holy Spirit, come into my life. Won't you wrap me up inside your life? Whoa, I know everything's gonna be alright, right. Best believe this here gonna last for life.
And we're back with First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill. Thank you, Dr. Drew, for a great first half. And Coach, the subject focusing on literacy. And it is a real problem. And as we continue to talk, we cannot save these Black boys' lives. We cannot save our young people if they can't read.
Can't read. I mean, and Drew's going to be talking about some things. I took up a lot of his time, so I'm going to try to give it back here. But I'm telling you, over the last week, just doing this, and I sent him some information, I knew it was an issue, but I didn't quite comprehend the impact that it's having and how it's going unchecked. And do you hear the conversations? I mean, this is not a major conversation. I think we're going to have, my goal now is to look at how we can do reading camps, or rather than doing football camps, we got to do football camps with reading. We got to do something. We have to have a national Black male literacy summit. I mean, this has to become a national conversation. Because, and addressing the other issues, we can sit here and talk about the homicide epidemic all we want, but until we fix this, that's not going to change. Right. All right. Because what we're saying is that, listen, I was looking at, because I follow all of these crime sites, okay, that's specifically in urban communities. And I'm looking at these young men waking up and going and murdering people and then turning themselves in. Now, it's one thing to think you're going to go out here and wake up in the morning. I'm saying you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Something happens. You have a weapon. You get into somebody. You kill somebody down on Asher. Then you turn yourself in for 40 years. So I'm saying now that's not normal. And so you got to understand what could happen with the person's life that they no longer want to pursue liberty and happiness because of how they are consumed with the conditions of their lives. And so this is dysfunctional. And I'm saying and the conversation has to be in a movement, much like the civil rights movement that happened, that guaranteed equality. But we have to revisit this whole system now, because the instruction is flawed. The instruction is flawed. How in the world in the United States of America, you're going to tell me that I should be okay with 94% of Black males going through a educated high school system and cannot be efficient after getting taxpayers' money and thinking it's okay?
It really is kind of crazy to think of. It is really kind of crazy to me to think about. You spend 13 years, kindergarten through 12th grade. And what do you have to show for it? You got a diploma, you got to walk across the stage, but functionally you can't read. Functionally, you don't have basic math skills. And all those history classes and all that, you really couldn't read them. So you really didn't apply any of it. You just kind of floated through. What purpose were those 13 years of your life? And then I look at this, and when we started talking to Dr. Prince about reading, and he says, it happens naturally when you get these kids in their passion spots. And he explained it. And one of the crazy things was how many of the kids in the pilot programs wanted to do candles. wouldn't have been anything I would have thought a kid wanted to do. But it's like, okay, you're going to make this candle. Well, what's in this candle? Can you pronounce it? Can you read it? Can you do this? Oh, well, we got to write down the procedures for how to make a candle.
Mm-hmm.
So just like what you were talking about, the guy got fired because he didn't know how to write someone up. Well, part of the process is I want to make this candle and I want to be able to make money with it. I want to be able to tell others how to make it. You're learning to read and write in a capacity that makes sense to you in something that you like. You're not going and reading some book out there that makes no sense to you.
That's right.
I mean, Beowulf or whatever. I mean, you're reading something that makes sense.
That's the reason that student athletes graduate at a higher percentage rate than non-student athletes, and being involved in extracurricular activities that incentivizes you to do that. So in order to play ball, okay, you have to be on the team. You have to make sure to go to college. And I'll say this. I wonder why. When I looked at this, I've asked this question before. Why would HBCUs, and things have changed with NIL, but I would ask the question, why would HBCUs operate under the NCAA academic standards for eligibility? Because I said, you get no money, all right? And Coach Eddie Robinson, what they found out at Grambling, Coach Eddie Robinson, prior to Prop 48 coming in, and John Thompson walked off the court to defy that legislation because it said it will cause irreparable harm to Black boys because of the standards of how the test was created and the bias that was within the testing instrument. Okay. And it's really interesting as you study that to understand how that manifested itself, but how our young boys, when they realize in order to get 17 or 2.5, I have to read, I have to do this so I can play ball. My point is, if you've been suspended and you can't play ball in elementary school and middle school, that's why we started boxing. Mm-hmm. So everybody had to understand we started boxing simply because it's an individual sport to box as a team, but can't nobody box for you in the ring. This and that. You have 2-on-2 wrestling, but you don't have 2-on-2 boxing. WWF, they're tag team. You know what I'm saying? Right. You don't do that. This your fight. This me and you, and this what. Well, so now you can take this boxing and you can keep a kid engaged. I mentioned this yesterday. That's how Mike Tyson was found. Gus took him and he became a world champion because he took that energy. And imagine Mike Tyson in the communities if the ring wasn't there. He would have ended up in prison. Mm-hmm. His men already, even with what he's at. But let's take this and channel it, as you said, Dr. Prince, and look and say, okay, I gave example. Anthony Lucas, now head football coach, Fayetteville High School. He couldn't pass the ACT from Tallulah. All right. I had to take him, get him in the Sylvan Learning Center. He ended up passing the test, but he had to learn to take the test. All right. Because of where he was in northern Louisiana, things that come with education, all right? But he was so emotionally intelligent. That's why he's a head football coach at Fayetteville High School, the #1 high school football program in Arkansas, okay?
And I mean, you look at, if you look at the, I watch a lot of videos on touring D1 sports facilities. They have huge amount of tutoring space in those training facilities. An athlete comes in and is not reading proficient, they have tutors that are focused on getting them to reading. Yep. And that's not available to the general population.
Not at that level of intensity.
No. And when you look at it, I think the other thing that's really interesting about a lot of these student athletes that are coming in that, and they it's Anthony Lucas barely got through high school. They are getting a chance at an education, but they're still having to earn it. They might not have a doctorate in education.
Right.
But guess what? They've got a degree that they've had to take the classes for. They've had to read and write for. Now granted, they had tutors that walked them through it and helped them, but man, they learned the skills. And when you look at an Anthony Lucas outside of the sports, he's been successful.
No question.
Because they're teaching those skills that let them grow.
Correct. And Anthony he was a good student. He just didn't test well. And so he had a good GPA, so he wasn't challenged in that arena, and he and Marvin both. But when it came down to taking that standardized test, to said, okay, you have to go take this test and you have to score 17 or 2 and have 2.5 in the core to be eligible. My point was for Coach Eddie Robinson, prior to those standards, okay, these standards for when we start looking at, okay, we have these standards to give to parents. If you're on welfare, you can't have a man in the house. The man gets out the house, so we see what's happening. These new standards, these federal mandates that comes, the people think they're making things better by putting these standards. But what you find out doing segregation, Coach Eddie Robinson put more players in the pros from Grambling than any other place, because those players were not allowed to go to PWIs. And what they found out, I think 80 or 85%, it may have been higher than that, wouldn't have qualified by the Prop 48 standards, but he had over a 90% graduation rate. And so those are the kids that you're talking about that got into when you're talking about what standard are we talking about you have to meet in order to say you're qualified to teach somebody when, check this out, you just said the numbers from 1865 to 1995. Who was evaluating those standards? And the literacy rate increased almost 50%. All right. Yeah. So now you come and let some educated person come in there and say, well, we need to put these new standards in to make sure that we're giving a quality education. Well, you put those standards in and things have decreased. There were no standards there.
There was no national education.
That's exactly right.
There was
no accrediting body.
No accrediting body. When you look at most of these school districts, there was no black school district. There was
the community.
and when you look at that, to get to 1930, 16% illiteracy rate.
Now repeat that. 1865,
1870, we're almost 100% coming out of slavery illiteracy rate. To 1930, a 16.4, I think is what it was, percent illiteracy rate without any government assistance. I mean, most of that time there wasn't even a federal income tax to fund anything. These were private schools.
Jim Crow laws.
Everything against them.
And look at
they hadn't escaped the Deep South.
Yep.
They hadn't escaped all these things, but they realized the value, and that's the thing I think that's most important. When a family realizes the value of education and reading as a freedom opportunity, it changes everything.
You know what the last 5 letters of the word community says? Unity. That's what it was. That's what it was from them. Community. That's what we had. Community. Stay with us as we go to the fourth quarter. How are we going to get that back? How are we going to get that back? We're going to talk about that when we come back. First and 45 with Coach Fitz, Bishop Fred, and Dr. Cole Drew. We'll be right back with you.
Black men have so many different problems, so many different issues. Homicide rate, high incarceration rate, fatherless homes. What is America going to do about it?
What are we going to do about it? Yeah, what are we going to do about it? When I say we, I'm talking to black men. I'm asking us, what are we going to do about issues that negatively impact black men and boys to a greater degree than other demographics? Everybody knows about the homicide epidemic in this country regarding black men and boys. While comprising only 6% of the nation's population, will account for 50% of the nation's homicide victims. So what are we going to do about it? Here's another disturbing reality. While making up only 6% of the nation's population, we're about 40% of the nation's prison population. In fact, 1 in 3 black males are projected to go to jail in their lifetime. Again, I ask, what are we going to do about it? Collectively, black men have the means to solve these problems. We just don't have the mind to do so. And means without the mind is meaningless. Brother, it doesn't mean a thing.
They look new and I look at my feet. They do too, 'cause I'm free. free. Thank God I'm free. I'm free.
And we're back with First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill, the last quarter, and the subject tonight is education, literacy, and one component, guys, that we also got to remember was back in the day, Coach, we had the village. We had those individuals who cared about our kids.
How are we gonna get that back, Fred? How are we gonna get it? I mean, how can we? I mean, how can we disrupt this way that we're moving, understanding the negative impact that's taking place? How do we observe what's going on? I shared yesterday. How do we look in America and said, nearly 500,000 black males have been murdered in the United States of America, and I'm still getting negative stuff on post. I don't really care anymore. I mean, I'm just, because I said, like I told them, how can you say you're stereotyping when it's a fact? Okay, if you want me to say something different, we got to do something different, because I mean, we can't be around here trying to, in my, estimation of how we're trying to make things better, and then worry about how people are, evaluating us, because I said, we can't seek validation from a world that crucified a perfect man. Mm-hmm. Think about that. Right. So as I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about how this is, taking place, how do we continue to allow this to manifest in this direction without trying to totally disrupt, what's going on in our society?
Well, and I think when I look at one of the posts that you made, and I look at the comments, one comment wants to disregard the data, call it racist. One comment wants to say, yeah, there's a problem. We got to talk about solutions. One comment is the educator comment you made, but I love Willie Davis's comment. It's not an excuse or anything. He goes, exaggerated percentages or not, we see and know that it is happening. Any percentage is too much on the negative side of this ongoing trauma. Yes, my friend, enough is enough. And Willie Davis is one of those guys that he is in the trenches every day.
That's right.
He's fighting this battle. He's working with these kids. But it's like, he is a guy that I know has become enraged by what's going on.
No question.
We got to see more people enraged at this kind of stuff and less people enraged at all the garbage going on that we can't change, because this is one we can.
And this is one, because if you look and you said, okay, what are we going to do really, we have to have, I'm convinced. I'm rather doing a football camp. We got to do reading. I mean, in a way that we got, that's why we're using meta, to your point, to engage kids, to engage the disengaged. But how, and I'm not saying, listen, you can put a person in high school and say, you got to come work on reading, because most kids not wanting to do that. But I'm just sitting here thinking, guys, how you're disenfranchised by not having the basic skills of living. Now, look, I hate math. Okay. But reading allows me to do some minimal math. You know what I'm saying? If I couldn't read, I couldn't even do any math. So when I look here and I see the issues that are caused because of this, and you look at the 3 states that are impacted: Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. What happened? Look at those illiteracy rates. Look at those teenage pregnancy rates. Look at those disparity of incarceration rates. And however you want to evaluate racist propaganda, or however you want to classify, that's fine. Here's what I'm trying to tell you right now. We are losing our black boys every day. There's a great disparity of how the deaths taking place in our community compared to others. We allow for music, the rap. Nobody says anything about that. Okay? You can't do that with any other ethnicity, though. Rap about another group and see what happens. But we let 21 Savage, we let everybody do all the rapping that takes place, and listen, and I get it. I hear it all the time, and to understand how this is being allowed. Fred, you and I both know there is no way in the 60s and 70s and 80s that music would have been loud in our community. When Rapper's Delight came out in 1979, hip hop to hip it to hip it. And you know, when they said, if you won't have my girlfriend, you take her friend, everybody kind of looked around there and said, you know, if your girl start acting up, can I go with her friend? Yeah, so wait a minute now. Don't be don't be putting your business in the street like that. You know, I mean, so now it is get the money and do this. And, you know, and like my man say, hip hop is hypocritical rap. It's hypocritical what it's doing to our kids, because now you take a kid who can't read, but he can rap. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, if you have that type of intensity and motivation to learn, we just got to find a right way to channel that energy. And I can't blame the kid. And one thing that I realized that we have to do is we have to hold someone accountable, because you can't have children and want the government to raise them. It can't happen. Mm-hmm. And that's the basis of what we're talking about, because those things, when you can't do that. And we have to hold. So how can you go and have a child and want the government to raise, and then understanding the crisis that we're dealing with, and listen, and the kids don't even understand it. I'm not saying that's the community piece. I'm not saying that when that kid has that teenager, they're not understanding the results of that, because they haven't been taught. So to do better, you have to know better. And they haven't been taught. So when you have that structure and say, hey, son, this is not what you do. Hey, daughter, this is not what's acceptable. There are no standards. There are no moral standards that we have to adhere to. So if you had one child at 16, you won't, but you have 3 more before 20, that's a problem. Yep. And because what the data is saying that's going to happen with that. And so now the government then becomes responsible for all the children. Yeah. And that's not how God intended for it to be.
It is kind of crazy to me that somewhere, and you kind of hit on it earlier, somewhere we've gotten on this tangent of seeking after all this knowledge, of becoming the sharpest in the tools so that we can argue and we can make a point and we can do all this, but we've forgotten the basics. And we go back all the time and we talk about, man, if the population just got the 10 Commandments, if the population just got that one, love the Lord your God, love your neighbor as yourself, if they just got that. But I think it's the same thing on education. We've gotten so deep on things with kids so young, mm-hmm. that all of a sudden these kids are so overwhelmed by all this information before they can read, before they can write, before they can do math. We're bombarding them with all this garbage. And then we look at AI, because I remember when I started college, there weren't computers. When I finished college, we had a computer, but spell check, man, it made me a worse speller. Phones, autocorrect, man, yeah. I'm a worse speller on that. AI is going to make us dumber and dumber. Oh, yeah. But it's the basics. It's the basics of who we are. Man, if we can read and we can write, we can communicate with anyone. And communication is what it seems like is breaking down everywhere. Because what happens when a young kid doesn't have a vocabulary? He very quickly moves from words to fists. Mm-hmm. And when he doesn't have powerful enough fists and he knows it, he moves to weapons. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, we've just escalated this, and it all started because that kid was missing basic fundamentals.
Yeah, and you just mentioned, I mean, think about a kid walking in the street. I remember watching a documentary of Chicago, and the kid said he dropped out of school because they made him go to another school outside of his community. He had to walk through gangs, and he realized, I'm not going to do that. So the kid, he dropped out of school because it was unsafe for him to have to walk out of his community to another community because they signed him to another school. All of these factors are leading to the crisis that we're facing today. And so when we look at these factors and we're looking at these social determinants, and listen, I'm not going to post anything that I haven't checked for facts, and knowing, I mean, like I put in there was a slight exaggeration on those. Like, for example, the number is not 50 or 60% of Black men in prison, but the number is not significantly different. So that's the reason I said, in the post that we look at. But when I look at here, it says, it's 50% of, it's not 50, it's like 40. Okay, so it's 10%, it's 10 percentage points. So that looks, and then, commit 60% of murders is 56%. All right. So when you look, and if you're rounding numbers off, you're going there. So I know this data. I look at it daily. I know that in the time that you're talking about, in the 30s, when did you say that the literacy rate was down to 16%?
1930.
Okay, 1930. At that point, less than 20% of births were outside of wedlock. I'm just all the things that you can look at. So when you think about, today, 63% of Black men don't work full time. That's a crisis, because what skill do you have? And so that's why we're working on this with the Booker T. Washington Workforce Village, fed, and a job, welding, plumbing, HVAC, carpentry, electrical. That's how Black Wall Street was built. That's how unity comes in your community. That's how we have solutions to this problem. Yes, we're at First and 45. We're talking about the crisis, but we're promoting solutions as well. So if you want to get in and help us, please. But I can promise you, Drew and I, we're going to be having a literacy summit here. I don't know how. I'm already advocating it. I hope you participate. But we have to come up with game plans for summer reading programs for our young people within Central Arkansas, within the state of Arkansas. And we have to have a game plan to save our sons. And we're going to do it. Stay tuned. Bishop, close out in prayer.
God, we are blessed tonight to come together. We thank you for the time and help our children, God, as they prepare to go back to school. We just lift them up. We lift up our communities. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.